So we're going to put this next movement in here. We're going to stop in the middle. It's to portray later tempo rubato versus earlier tempo rubato. So the first half the second version is a recreation of the first half within particular principles. So we'll stop and then start again. And now, this is to portray the earlier tempo rubato, which is a rhythmically adapted version. Same melody. the fourth example. The wayfaring stranger is one that I'll work into the presentation. So we're going to move on to the last one. I'm going to give my arm a break here for a second. It's very tense. Thank you. And that concludes the playing portion. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on to the lecture portion. Thank you very much. I was pretty interested. I've been quite interested in Arthur Pryor for quite some time. I've always been thoroughly impressed by his composition and his style and his nuance and his character and the charm and personality and inflection. So I decided to play it, and I took it down the octave because I wanted to play it and try to have my print on it without struggling too hard. So this is on? Good. Awesome. And let's move on to the lecture presentation portion. Okay, so we're going to move on to... Okay. Okay, cool. So my topic of presentation is tempo rubato. I find it to be a very important topic that is kind of, there's a lot to know about it, a lot to be known about it. Specifically, I wanted to know more about what role it has in music and the impact on the outcome of performance. As I was always told that it was about the right hand of a piano being slightly behind the left, or slightly ahead of the left hand. So I kind of always figured that my role as a trombone was to be slightly behind, I guess, a little bit, because I was embodying the left hand. Anyways, but that's not the case. There are a lot of different rules for it and a lot of different ideas throughout different parts of the history of music as it has existed in this state. So this is my presentation. It's Teaching Tempo Rubato to Low Brass Musicians. It is a pedagogical plan for understanding, analyzing, applying tempo rubato to practice, technical exercises, improvement studies, and the low brass repertoire. It is directly applicable to anyone and all instrument in almost all circumstances outside of ensemble playing where you have to fit to somebody else's time. So it is in particular important for moments when the musician is left up to the ability to determine their own choices. When to start, when to stop, and things like this. Cool. So moving onward. The textbook definition of tempo rubato is robbed or stolen time. I found it ironic because all of the examples that I was finding, I didn't really think that visually it didn't look like anything was being robbed or stolen. They were just being moved around. And there's generally a rule of compensation. If you slow down, then you have to speed up to make up for it. Reginald Gaddy, in an article on tempo rubato, wrote, "It is the free treatment of tempo in especially expressive and impassioned passages, when the usual insensible stringendo collando to the nuances of phrasing stands out forcibly." So, to me, it is the relation that emotion plays in tempo, and the nuances associated with it, the manipulation. I find it hard to have it be about starting and slowing and compensating and all of this adjusting. There has to be more to it than that. So let's take a look. Tempo rubato dates all the way back to the 1300s. It wasn't actually connected or printed until I believe around the 1700s, but it started in 1320 with the beginning of rhythmic robbery, taking liberties with music, associated with vocal music, which eventually the trends were picked up by instrumentalists. In 1535 were more or less the beginnings of improvisatory-based programmatic music, making sure that the featured works had accompanying variations and accompanying pieces that were drastically different in terms of tempo and in terms of style and things to like start it out and end it. And they didn't want to, the improvisatory pieces were not to compete with the concert works. In 1550, the lengthening and starting and ending of notes started to begin. 1594, compositional embellishments and ornamentations begin to take root. This kind of, I believe, all began with the diminution manuals, as we learned to practice ornamentation. Around 1600, there's an intense expression associated with Baroque monody and early opera. And this expression was generally, I would say, massively approved by the public, so it was quick to be taken on to the ideas of expression in other instruments. 1695, Roger North's The Musical Grammarian was an ensemble-based method for breaking time. 1723 was the first real connection associated with vocal music, and this was Tosi, and he wrote the manual Opinioni dei Cantori Attici e Moderni, and it was translated by Galliard. It's a wonderful presentation of the inflection and how to manipulate tempos and performance techniques to result in better mastery for vocalists. In 1752 was the first time it was actually published, the term tempo rubato. In 1755, it began to occur regularly in keyboard and solo and violin music. 1780, Johann Adam Hiller created rules for anticipation and retardation. And from the 1800s onward, the definition of it kind of began to change a little bit. It was not really so much this adaptation of melody thing, but became this kind of rules of starting and slowing. So the identity of it changed. Distinguishing traits in the dual identity of different kinds of tempo rubato, earlier versus later. Ironically, the later actually goes way back. You'd think that would be called earlier, but earlier is more relevant in this circumstance. Later tempo rubato concepts, subtle and expressive rhythmic flexibility beyond accelerandos and retardandos. It was originally associated with speech-based vocal music. Tempo rubato achieved its roots through neum-based composition and notation. It adapted into the lengthening and shortening of notes to convey importance, and speeding or slowing of within particular harmonic modes, in particular Gregorian chant or religious music. I believe it started with cantors in church. If you think about when they start and when they slow, it's always on important words at cadences and things like this. So it was, the ideas began constructing here where they could play with the reverb tail to get expression out of it and manipulate the space. In the meantime, quote, the same desire for more intense expression gave rise shortly before 1600 to monody and early opera. Here, the solo singer could change the tempo as he wished in order to achieve a speech-like eloquence. Rubato's relation to words facilitated time alteration to improve dramatic impact. This alteration allowed for the lengthening or shortening of notes. This goes into the idea of melodic variation. Was the second example that I played, which was this tender song. I wanted to play it as it was written, originally constructed, and then to do an evolved version based on these ideas. So melodic variation began around 1320 and continued through the 18th century. The technique involves shortening or elongating melody to strengthen performer creativity. The technique involves the principle that the effect of a note can be prolonged by the addition of other pitches that act to either ornament the original note or to connect it with the next. Alteration of note values often occurs as a consequence of this procedure. If you decorate a note before it or afterwards, it kind of pushes the melody back a little bit.
the notation technically in time. It may be in time, but in theory, it's pushed back. And so when you go into it, whether they're ornamentations that occur before the beat or on the beat, they affect the melody, and therefore they affect the time. Hence, robbing it of time, or stealing the time. The beginnings were rooted in improvisation, ornaments, and embellishment, decorating the note and around it. It really got its stronghold in the theme and variations, which is why I wanted to play Arthur Pryor. He was the man for that, which is compositional-based motific development. Suspension and notes inegales are the anticipation or lingering of tones to build tension. The idea of the suspension as affecting or grabbing the melody so as to hold on. This affects the idea because the whole concept of time is to get to the pure pitches, and they're surrounded by tension. So arpeggiation was another idea that became associated with tempo rubato. Usually when you're arpeggiating, you're speeding up or you're slowing down, kind of naturally along with the melody, and this allows for timing and easy access to out-of-range notes. Terms typically associated with tempo modification are rubato, ritardando, rallentando, accelerando, stringendo, collando, lentando, affrettando, allargando, accompagnato, stretto, impressant, pressé, arrêtant, morendo, ritenuto, and schneller. I like this quote here. The French have no such expression as killing time. In their more philosophical vocabulary, the term is passing time, which means savoring all the moments of it, each to his own individual enjoyment. While we battle with time, they relax with tempo. I find that to be something that I've never fully understood until kind of beginning my research with this. Why is it so hard to play in time? Why is it so hard to play with the metronome? Well, it's a lummoxy instrument. It's large, but it's not. It doesn't have to be in time. It could be out of time. It's really about the expression associated with it, the emotionality that connects the notes to the moment, the brain to the body, the instrument. Grappling with time is tricky. Specifically, the most often uses of tempo rubato are within cadences and cadenzas. They're used as compositional punctuation points to end sections or lengthen solo parts. They can be applied composition-wide, intentionally strategized for harmonic impact, like they relate to the vocal-based text, or text-based vocals in that they're portraying specific and important words. Cadenzas offer the best opportunity for freedom because they're totally free-form. They're naturally sparse and flexible and accommodate performer creativity with time. Almost all of Arthur Pryor's original works have a cadenza in them. It's quite charming. Same with the Clarke studies. These things allow the ability to be at ease and to be spontaneous and to make choices on the spot that don't affect the composition because nobody else is playing with you. It's the performer's moment to shine and to make their own choices that aren't printed on the page. Ornamentation types that facilitate tempo rubato, trills, alter time and prepare cadences. The trill doesn't happen in a subdivided manner. It eventually kind of ceases, but it wiggles around and it has the ability to alter the time. Arpeggiation, slowing into cadences provide direction towards lower or higher notes. Grace notes, which function as interjectory delays of important notes. Portamentos, pitch sliding for effect, or the glissando, which kind of is a schmoozy thing, which is a characteristic trait, which is a product of tempo rubato. Mordentes, deceptive ornamental trills. Appoggiaturas, grace notes starting on the beat. Gruppettos, interjectory connecting turns. Katie and Dr. Heath, you guys have noticed, these are like standard for any organs book. Entire sections committed to this entire part, which explains the nuance, as well as the same period that Pryor came on. It's a period of charm and inflection. And these things are still used. They're still used today. They're used all the time. Oftentimes we don't recognize them or aren't able to determine what they mean. But when you see these things, they are implying tempo rubato. So express yourself within them. Rhythmic flexibility, creativity, destruction, or strategy. So I don't know if you guys can see this. This is the Tender song that I was working on. You can see. I can make a larger version if you guys would like, but it's more or less the same thing. I kept the same notes. If you compare this one to this one, the same notes, same order of notes, but different rhythms. It's always based off the bass line, off the root, the harmonic movements. We do not alter notes that we do not alter the melody in a way to add notes that do not work with the harmonic function. So a lot of it is kind of toying with the starts and the stops. If you guys have ever played a church service, it's kind of okay. They kind of love it when you after the melody has been established, you dabble and you kind of alter it. And this was the concept of this. Might be a little too notey over here, but really it's about the inflection, and the inflection still allows for time. So you could write it in a particular way, but you don't have to commit to that. Arthur Pryor proved that in all of his recordings. When you look at his cadenzas versus his published works, they're totally different. He messes with the rhythm all the time. And they sound great. As long as he commits to it, is what matters. Rules of melodic variation and transformation. Concept first originated when instruments began performing renditions of vocal works. The ornamentation was a practice originally derived from diminution exercises, which are basically technical exercises for Baroque instruments. The melodic variation is theory-based. Performers should analyze accompaniment to recognize conflictions and tastefully adapt desired expressions to psychology of the piece. We're not going to go out of character, right? It's got to stay within the character. It's got to, and it's okay to mess with time or with all of these things within it. The basso continuo parts should always be observed first. Alterations must coincide with root movement. Once clarified that desired changes won't conflict harmonically, melody should be tastefully rearranged. Quote, tastefully. This is something that I saw all over the time in the reading, in every article. Every time they talked about it, they talked about very particular nuance. You can't go crazy. You go crazy and you end up with a theme and variations kind of thing. It's really, if it's a somber piece, you kind of need to maintain that. You can evolve it and adapt it, but tastefully. Once clarified that desired changes won't conflict harmony, melody should be tastefully rearranged and adapted to accommodate flowing time. Counterpoint is sometimes necessary to avoid dissonance. You guys will see with this Wayfaring Stranger that I performed that it's very. I actually had to had to compose particular sections using counterpoint so as to avoid too much rub. How are we doing on that? Okay. Although sources occasionally mention that the type of ornamentation should match the sense of the text, embellishment in the 16th century seems mainly to have been decorative or virtuosic, whereas it was in the next century and the Baroque period in general that improvised as well as notated embellishment became closely associated with expression. This quote kind of applies to the concept of rubato in faster tempos as opposed to slower as well. In slower tempos, it's more expressive. In faster tempos, it is more virtuosic, more showy. The vocal or instrumental performer of such embellished music was, of course, closely acquainted with the original work, since this was the version he saw in notation as he improvised his variations. Listeners to such a performance might or might not know the work in its original form. You're practicing the main variation, you're understanding the concepts, and then you start thinking of the possibilities of which it can go, which way, and ways to alter it, to adapt. And at that point, it's kind of just facilitating the need for more. You love the melody, you love the work, but you need more of it, and you need it to be different, to facilitate your talents. This is where the theme and variation came from. Appoggiaturas are grace notes performed before a note of the melody and fall on the beat. Arpeggiation, contour-based outlines used to set up important notes in faraway registers. The most conspicuous robbery is caused by the on-beat graces, which necessarily delay the appearance of the following note. Here's the Wayfaring Stranger. This is one I'm going to play for you guys right now. A fun little thing about this, it's all diatonic. I wanted to keep it simple. It's that way I don't need to worry so much about too much, just worrying about kind of getting into it. The play-along that I'm accompanying, I actually also recorded, I manually played in and recorded dulcimer, auto harp, some mandolin, nylon guitar, piano, some triangles, some wind chimes, and some accordion. And all of those components were individually recorded, taking into consideration the concepts of rubato as I was learning them. And then I took the solo part and adapted it, where you can see measures 1 through 7. The original 1 through 17 are the original theme, a simple diatonic melody, very elegant. No need to change it yet. Can be played as is. The second version, 18 through 33, is rhythmically and melodically altered, littered with tempo rubato effectors. The next section, 34, is would be the improvisation, hypothetically. If I were to, it retains the same harmonic changes, so there's new ideas. We can maintain the old, or we can do something new. Measure 42 will be different. I don't like that figure. The recapitulation of original melody. Ending accommodates arpeggiation into the final suspended notes. So the accompaniment is tempo rubato. It embodies the different ideas of the tempo rubato, the melodic variation versus the adaptation versus the give and flow, the ebb and so time is a thing that is, all components are kind of wiggly and wobbly, and you'll notice it's very free, but it's very natural to sound. And it sounds, I like it. So let's give it a try. Let me get this loaded up.
One, two, three.
sake of time, I'm going to move on. So you guys can kind of get the idea of how things were altered in a way, and how it all interfits. Does it have to be on the beat? Does it have to be mechanically on the beat? No, it's not about that. Something like this isn't. Most on the beat has its time and its place. And I think for the sake of inspiration and not getting burnt out, proper balance needs to be achieved. Alright, so moving on to the actual trombone part. This is Arthur Pryor. He's the man. He's the guy who I was playing his music for. He's an accomplished trombonist, performer, composer, conductor. He was an estimated soloist of over 10,000 performances. He was a performer for royalty. He played trombone with the Sousa Band. He was a composer of around 300 different works, including marches, novelties, tone poems, and 3 light operas. A total virtuoso. Total just like a maniac musician. Just amazing. Outstanding. He was entirely immersed in music from a young age. It was said that his father used to hit him on the head when he played wrong notes with a violin bow. As a featured soloist, his understanding of time and the ability to manipulate it both through composition and improvisation embody total tempo rubato, the whole concept of it. He lived it, he wrote it into his parts, but he also offered a lot of freedom. Alright, so older recordings of prior works versus newer performance interpretations. You guys will hear the difference. I'm going to play through a couple of them. The most obvious differences are, when comparing Arthur Pryor's playing to newer renditions, are the sound and the small bore versus the large bore. Everyone now plays on a large bore. It's a very large sound, very mechanical. Sounds great, very pure. The smaller bore, man, it just sounds like it was like a packed with coffee or something like that. It's very, very nimble. Arthur Pryor played on a small bore horn. Since recording quality hadn't quite set in yet, a lot of the timbre and the tone is lost due to the aged cylinder recordings. Everything was also recorded in mono, so it is a one-signal source. Arthur Pryor, the composer and soloist, takes great liberties with the rhythmic adaptation and improvisatory-based cadenzas when compared to current printed editions. However, the tempos of now, as performers are performing the works now and interpreting them, are drastically different than how the composer originally interpreted them. And I think that this is also the case for people like Mahler and other Sousa, and everything's become so on the beat. The ebb and flow is practically, it's there, but it's kind of becoming a lost art form. So, however, alright, so let's move on. Slow tempo rubato opportunities allow for better emotional connection and nuance. Faster tempos, once again, offer flashiness and virtuosity. Finding and learning works that facilitate a wealth of tempo options between slow and fast speeds allow for best tempo flexibility. So something in the middle, which allows you to go slow and allows you to go fast as you want. This provides the best options for stealing time. I'm gonna switch chords now, so if you guys can turn the volume down so you don't get any pop. Alright, it's gonna take a second, gotta get the internet working. So we're coming up on, should I just play 2 examples then? Would that be best for time's sake? Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna show you, I wanted to show Joe Alessi. These are the top 3 are some of the best soloists, trombone soloists right now. Joe Alessi, Christian Lindbergh, and Elaine Trudell. They're all different interpretations, but the top 3 are pretty close. Similarly, characteristic-wise, tempo choices. Let's see if I can get this going here. Who's this? Alright, let's try it. This is Elaine Trudell. He improvised his solo, making use of multiphonics. compare that against the composer's version. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to, instead of showing all these different versions which I was planning on, I'm going to move to the composer version. What is that? Joe, let's see. His idea of tempo rubato was drastically different and less on the beat than what we're doing now. It's like waves, and even the way he like skyrockets into it is almost like he's being shot out of a catapult or something like that. It's very showy. All right, so to move on, so you can hear the difference, the tone obviously, and the recording quality, but tempo choices have changed drastically, and for the positive and for the better, but it's good to, I think, also respect and acknowledge these really old historic recordings, because they show us a lot about how our ideas have changed about these things. All right, so positives and negatives. I'm going to probably skip the. Well, let's keep going. Positive and negatives of metronome: static tempos versus click track, perpetually changing tempos. So metronome mechanical precision should be used for speed and consistency, or precision. Trying to place emotionality and expression into metronome practice is limiting and a little bit restrictive. It doesn't mean you can't do it, it just means that it's a little bit harder to do it when you've got this hit you in the face, right? It goes in your ear, like, it's easier to connect when it's not there. Dulls the connection. Click track is good for strategic tempos, collaborating with media, good for planning tempo curves. They're easy to follow. When tempo curves are linear, quarter equals 81, 82, 83, 84, 85 on a measure-by-measure basis, but if you're dealing with irrational lines, they get like practically impossible to follow. When recording into project sessions, remember that tempo curves need to be programmed in manually or input based on beat detection, using beat detection. So a way to start working rubato into your practice is to any warm-up or any method is an excellent starting place. Practice it with time and practice it out of time. Practice manipulating time. Practice going when the arpeggios go up, speed up. When they go down, slow down. Like go with it, and try. It's okay to have it be weird. Our ears are unacquainted to it because we've changed conceptions of tempo as they relate to past histories, to the history. So Arben's method is an excellent place to start. Scales, arpeggios, diatonic improvisations, as I was doing with Wayfaring Stranger, subdivided or repetitive articulation exercises focusing on timing. So repeated passages that are warming up the lips and getting the tongue in place so that you can practice starting and slowing and speeding back up and catching up and adjusting on the fly. Lip slurs or jazz. Jazz is like the quintessential definition of tempo rubato as well. Ironically, they probably wouldn't say it themselves, but It is. They're perpetually changing melodies, perpetually changing the lead sheets, adapting it, improvising it, and messing with the time, always. Understanding the concepts, knowing when to apply to low-brass methodology. So always plan intentionally and use sparingly. You can't slap it on all the time. It just gets a little bit gaudy and a little bit ridiculous. Less is always more. Cadences, ornamentation, embellishments, arpeggios, simple melodies, cadenzas, improvisation, and a proper balance between metronome-based practice and free tempos are important for not feeling burnt out. Gotta keep that inspiration alive. We want to connect with our music. If it's purely mechanical, we start to question why it's so important. So take risks, make mistakes, learn your own limitations. Without risk, there is no reward. Good exercises for low brass methodology studies conducive to and for rubato application. Arbenz, Voxman, Lugilis, Boberon, Bordone, Bloom, Blazevich, Tyrrell, Peterson, Ostrander. Anything basically with tempo alteration suggestions already written in facilitates this. It's okay to make your own choices, especially if you're just practicing by yourself. You know, just mess with it. Better you can do it than you can't, or you're not comfortable with it. Better to have it in your pocket as a skill set. Practicing in real time, practicing in time and out of time to help feel difference, and don't let the metronome or tension affect your technical precision. Don't let the metronome or attention affect your technical precision. And don't let your technical precision stop you from connecting with your exercises. We're musicians, it's based in expression. Musicality first. And specific types of music that accommodate tempo rubato. This is my last slide. Any improvisatory-based music. I like to warm up making up stuff. It just feels good. Like, I have no guilt about playing wrong notes, I'm just making it up. I like religious music is good. Simple melodies to be adapted. Preludial forms, once again, non-programmatic concert works. Things like fantasias, ricochets, toccatas, capriccios, intonazones, preludes, theme and variation-based composition, bel canto-styled melodic etudes. Anything that's rooted in vocal pedagogy is perfect. Non-metronomic mechanical-based works, trying to take mechanical exercises and connect with them is a challenge, and it's a wonderful tool to help connect with things that we do not like. Soloist-based works, soloist-based chamber works. Rubato does work in small group settings quite well. Once you get bigger, you have to kind of let it go and let it slide. Unaccompanied solos, repertoire, jazz, blues, experimental, 20th century, and I've also come to recognize also that we're noticing more and more top 40 is actually kind of making use of some of this, but more of the older, or of the earlier idea of tempo rubato, the left hand, right hand kind of thing. So if we look at it as the beats and the composition being all, and the chord changes being all left hand, and the overdubbed soloists as the right hand, they are allowed to take some liberties. So even when we hear top 40 or something like more commercial, it's still in there. It's just a different definition than that in which we know it currently. So thank you guys for coming. That's my presentation. Thank you very much, and have a good day.